Good morning, everybody, on this Wednesday, a bit of a sad Wednesday, with the passing of Johnny Clegg, an icon, I think, in South African music. And I think from here, or from us here at the Institute of Race Relations and really at the Daily Friend, we pass our sincere condolences to his family and friends. And maybe as we look to open the show, and I must say, you know, it is a bit of a sad one, also in terms of what we're looking to discuss to an extent. Ian, let me first welcome you to the show. It's always nice to have our resident economist here. Ian Cruikshanks, of course, is the chief economist at the Center of Risk Analysis, and a familiar face for all of you viewers here is our chief editor of the Daily Friend, Ms. Sarah Gon. Sarah, hello.
Hello.
And Ian, hello.
Good to be with you again. Thank you.
Colleagues, you know, it's a bit of a sad topic, and I think it's one which it poses a massive risk to South Africans, and that's prescribed assets. The proposed policy of prescribed assets, which is essentially politicians giving themselves the power to be able to direct your fund manager to take your pension, your savings, your whatever the case may be, and invest it in what they determine. In other words, it could be something like Eskom or Sanrail or any of these SOEs, or even just state projects. So maybe a road between Durban and Mthatha, right? Essentially taking people's private funds and using them to for either political vanity projects or the like. Ian, South Africans are not a stranger to this policy, are they? Apartheid government did the same thing.
That's absolutely right. In days up until the early 1990s, we had prescribed assets then. That meant that pension funds, savings institutions, assurance companies had to put aside up to 60% of the total value of their assets into what was known as prescribed assets. In those days, it was government bonds, Eskom bonds, municipal bonds, any entity that could borrow on the local capital market had this right to access these funds. And at what sort of level, what sort of cost was it? Well, it was at a very real cost to the pensioners, whose funds those actually were. The money belonged to them, the savings belonged to them. And what we used to find is that the going rate, say, should have been 10% based on the commercial capital markets, and government would say, we will take their money at 8%. In other words, stealing that extra 2% of revenue, which should have been going to the beneficiaries of those funds.
Absolutely.
What's changed? To me, it looks very much like there's an attempt to go back to those bad old days when the rights of the beneficiaries of those funds are not put first and foremost. This may be the first time or an early time when we see crowd movement. There's been rumblings from the pensioners themselves that they don't like this idea. They don't want this. They want independent management, and quite rightly so. And I think that it'll be interesting to see if this develops into a crowd swell of movement, which is going to make it difficult for government to go ahead. One hopes so.
Ian, you know, I think anybody who watches the show might think, oh, you know, there goes the IRR again, you know, scaremongering, and really this is not the sort of thing that can happen. Politicians would never give themselves this sort of power. But a lot of people forget that the step from where we are right now to a situation of prescribed assets, in other words, politicians, just a quick reminder, giving themselves the power to decide where your pension is invested, usually in their political vanity projects, Eskom et al. The step between what we have now and that is actually not that far. I mean, we already have Section 28, for example, in the investment world, which determines, for example, one's retirement annuity or pensions, how it's delineated in percentage-wise. You know, a certain percentage on bonds, certain percentage on equity, a certain percentage offshore. Surely it would just be a case of the finance minister just saying, "Hey, I'm amending Section 28 to say more investment onto bonds." Would it be that easy?
I think that may be simplifying it, but that is the principle. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
How far could it go? Well, at the moment, it's I think 30% has to go into these prescribed assets. Mm-hmm. Under the previous dispensation, it was over 90%.
That's scary.
Now, what hope is there of a pension keeping pace with inflation when 90% is going into a fixed interest deposit?
Absolutely.
I'm afraid that is stealing money from the pensioners.
Sarah, it is theft from people who are doing the right thing, saving, investing, etc.
One of the problems in South Africa has always been, and every time you hear a finance person open their mouth about it, is the lack of saving in South Africa.
Yeah.
So any money that goes into a provident or pension fund or an RA is absolutely, it's crucial. You want to take the pressure off the state. And I wonder if it isn't a sort of long-term overreach. And I say that because it's obviously very tempting, because they're managing the economy very badly. They're not taking any of the advice necessary to improve the economy. So they are just looking for cash. Now, we've sort of thought that they'll go for the private pension funds first, which they might do. The problem is that the jewel in the crown is the government pension fund, which is one of the largest in the world. It's got to be too tantalizing not to, very soon, if they go for private first, for them to go for public. And I think that would probably, that might bring them down.
I'll bring you in just now, Ian, because I just wanted to give people a sense of perspective here. You know, we've been working with economist Mike Schussler on this issue, who has done fantastic work breaking down and analyzing the dangers, really, of a policy like prescribed assets as it is being proposed by the ANC. And really, it was also in the EFF manifesto. It's a leftist policy, socialist one. The South African pension funds overall are 8th largest in the world. So this is a lot of money that any politician is looking at and going, oh, goody, goody, gumdrops. And worse yet, what concerns me is, you know, we're not talking about, because the other sort of myth you'll hear from, you know, especially my detractors online, they'll say something like, well, you know, it's just white South Africans, you know, no one should worry about it really. It's a form of redress. Nonsense. 16 million South Africans hold pensions in this country, 11 of whom are still working and contributing towards them. You know, that's a vast majority of also black, honest, working South Africans who are going to be have their money stolen. Ian?
Effectively, that's right. Who are saying, you know, if you save, you want to know that you're saving for posterity. You're saving to be able to look after your own self.
Absolutely.
What's the biggest threat of all? Inflation.
Yeah.
You've got to have investments in stocks and in property. These where you can get a growing income stream. You can't get that in a fixed deposit, and this is the big threat. In some countries, there is an alternative. They do it on a pay-as-you-go basis. So there's no putting aside today's savings. They wait until the time comes to pay out the benefit. But gee, that's a terrible risk. When people who are contributing now are contributing at a certain percentage of salary, salaries go up, hopefully, and then there's not enough to pay that salary to give them a living wage. And that should be take that responsibility from the state.
Absolutely.
I think that there's something particularly morally repugnant about this. Of all the things that have been done that are morally repugnant, this is it. Because by the time you retire, you've worked your whole life. You've had a certain amount deducted from your salary towards your pension. The chances are that in any event, the majority of people, I mean the vast majority of people, are never going to quite recover what they anticipated recovering when they first started paying, because that whole estimation has gone out of sync. And so you have people who are going to go into their sort of their most, shall I say, delicate years, where there will be other expenses, and probably trying to live less anyway than they anticipated.
My big worry here is and again, this is perhaps, I'm putting on my cap here as the libertarian classical liberal. My big worry here is the use of force, essentially, because no right-thinking South African would take their pension money, the money that they are saving and scrimping to put aside, and willingly give it to an Eskom, which is a black hole of funding, an SAA, which is a black hole of funding. Again, the worst irony of it all is you might have a poor or a poorer working class South African who on a day-to-day basis maybe could never afford to fly SAA, now having their pension being on the line to prop up an SAA, which essentially is flown by, the well-heeled and the upper middle class. There is something, as you speak to the moral repugnance of it, I look at it through that lens and I go, here are politicians who have done their level best as ideologues, right? They're socialist ideologues to mess up the economy, now looking to subsidize their bad decisions using our pension funds. And there's something morally wrong about that. And just, I need to speak to the viewers a little bit on this one because we at the IRR are in the fight to save your pension and to say hands off to the politicians to it. Today, we're going to be heading over to the Association of Savings and Investments South Africa. This is an association that essentially encompasses a whole bunch of pension fund managers. And we're going to be asking them to get into the fight. What are they doing to assist you to stave off the predatory politicians that are coming after your pension? We're going to ask them that question. And equally, on my show, the Big Liberty Show, I'll be hitting the streets, talking to you, the ordinary South African, and asking you the question, would you willingly give over your pension to keep Eskom or SAA afloat? These are the questions I think we need to be posing to you guys as South Africans and to all industry players, and telling politicians, hands off our pensions. Guys, let's move on to the next topic. Jacob Zuma. Oh my goodness, what a show it has been to have him at the Zondo Commission. He's made some very interesting allegations, Sarah, and actually provided scant, in fact, no evidence for them.
Even if the allegations are true and there's spies crawling out of the woodwork, which is quite possible because we don't know a great deal about the extent to which the apartheid government managed to turn people or recruit people as spies. If you charge enough people with being spies or whatever they may be, it loses impact. Mm-hmm. But of course, then the bigger question comes in, and that is, if they were these terrible creatures, which he's trying to imply they are,
yes,
why were they with you for so long? Why did someone become the Minister of Minerals and I don't know
literally
what it was
why have him on your cabinet
exactly.
if he's this big spy? It's weird.
I'm sure if one could think about it and unpack it, but Zuma must be like a delight to psychologists who can literally, you look at the failure to answer certain questions, the repeated denials, or I don't know, but the profound sense of victimhood. And I suspect to some extent he feels it. But do you remember, in 2008, it was that sense of victimhood that became a populist movement to get him into power. And then he wasn't a victim anymore. Yeah. Now he was the president. Now he's not the president. He's a victim again. Yeah. It's fascinating, absorbing, and shall we say, repugnant at the same time.
Maybe as a last thought, what I find really funny is, and we've had this conversation before, and I'm going to bring you in here maybe through a different angle though, is, the markets want to see certainty. The markets want to see rule of law and accountability. And I just don't feel like the Zondo Commission, admirable as it may be in trying to get to the truth, is going to deliver any of that, because we have not seen prosecutions, we have not seen shifts in policy that align themselves to getting in clean people into government. How would markets respond and react if, for instance, no charges or no accountability is brought forward?
Then there would be no certainty of change, of lasting change. And one thing that financial markets hate more than anything else is uncertainty.
Absolutely.
Policy uncertainty, and that is what this would be. The rule of law, really, if these things are threatened, what could it mean? It could mean a diversion of funds which should be coming to the growth of the country, the growth of the infrastructure, get diverted elsewhere, and we never see it, and we stick in a low to no growth scenario. That is not what the people of the country want.
Absolutely. And funny enough, just speaking about what people don't want, and we've just finished speaking about prescribed assets. Zuma was the champion, if you will, of this faux radical economic transformation movement, which really is just a pseudonym and code for looters and thieves of the public purse. We now see, I'm sorry to bring us back to this, but I want us to sort of hash this out quickly. We now see that the sort of policies like expropriation without compensation, prescribed assets, and really the growing and bloated state are coming back full circle to haunt this administration, the Cyril Ramaphosa administration. And surely we should be seeing Cyril take the charge and actually lead the charge and saying, no, this is where it ends. We're calling for serious reform. Sarah?
I think, and I know it would be incredibly risky, but I can't help wondering that if Cyril had really grabbed the nettle, if I'm not mixing my metaphors, when he came in, however strong the opposing faction might have been, if he'd really led from the front, he might have, to some extent, overpowered them, because everyone would have got behind it. We would have got behind it. Investors would show interest, even if they didn't immediately come in.
Yeah.
But I think the real problem is the fact that he, in a way, I mean, I don't think Jacob Zuma is a socialist. I think Jacob Zuma is what Jacob Zuma wants to be at any given moment in time. But Cyril is. And that's why we've ended up in this position. All these ghastly socialist, Marxist policies that, I mean, we also have, the examples that it doesn't work are all out there. And it seems to be a psychological sort of stumbling block.
Can I just make one point in there? And just to back up what Sarah said, there is no new fixed investment, no fixed capital
Bottom
investment.
line.
There are no new factories being built. In fact, we're having a period now of job destruction rather than job creation. That is the proof of the pudding.
Absolutely.
That the investment community, not just South Africa, but globally, are saying you are still not reforming yourself into a globally attractive investment destination. No, we will not let you have a look at our funds.
And just as a last gasp, maybe, the worry then becomes when politicians are also then speaking the language of not securing someone's investment in this country, whether it's expropriation without compensation or prescribed assets, the real risk that you might invest here and that investment might be taken
away.
Well, the sort of the absolute linchpin of growing an economy is property ownership, property rights. And every sign just within, it doesn't even affect foreign investors yet, is that they are undermining the property rights of all of us.
And two other points: property rights, security of power supply, and labour understanding the join between productivity and reward.
Absolutely.
And until these are taken and said, this is the way we're going to go, we're going to make ourselves into a viable commercial enterprise, SA Inc. will be a real entity, then we're going to stick where we are, in the mud.
Absolutely. And guys, just a reminder very quickly, the IRR will be fighting for your property rights. I already mentioned the fact that we're in the fight when it comes to prescribed assets. Look for how you can get involved in the campaign at irr.org.za. And search under the pensions tab that you'll see there, where you can also write a letter to your fund manager, which we'll deliver, asking him or her what they're doing to protect your pension. We're saying hands off South Africans' pensions. Colleagues, let's wrap up. And I've been a little morbid this morning because of the news that we received about the passing of really one of our great icons of South African music, Johnny Clegg. Just very briefly, short, a few seconds really. What do you remember of Johnny Clegg? What are the enduring memories that you'll keep?
I think it was the fact that he was very much, he started, when he came onto the scene, is when I started paying attention to music in a serious way, and so I very much sort of grown up with Johnny Clegg's music. There was nothing, and there is nothing like him. He was a superb songwriter, and he said something in his last concert, the last concert I went to of his, talking about his life growing up, where he started to interact with Zulu men who taught him much that he knows. That he remembers seeing men with squash boxes walking down on pavements, playing walking songs. And wow, I remember that. I mean, I remember you would hear that periodically, and it's a distant memory. I mean, it's another era.
Ian?
Yes. You know, I think that we didn't recognize him for something that he was. It's one of our greatest exports. Just look how he went down in Europe, especially in France, whereas he was known as Le Zulu Blanc, the white Zulu. And, you know, he did a great deal. If only there'd been more concentration on promoting what we're best at. And that way we could have had perhaps a more acceptable reputation globally.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you so much. And really, our condolences once again to the Clegg family. Guys, thank you so much for watching this Wednesday edition of The Daily Friend. Remember, you can find all our writings, news, opinion, analysis, cartoons, and also links to the Big Liberty Show on the Daily Friend website, dailyfriend.co.za. And you can support our work, of course, by becoming a friend of the IRR. That's as simple as you SMSing your name to 32823. Terms and conditions apply. An SMS will cost you R1. If you don't like SMSs, as I often hear people saying, is there a better way of doing this? Well, hey, sign up a monthly debit order of R90 via the website at irr.org.za/join. Guys, as I said, thank you so much for joining us. Look out for the special episode on prescribed assets today, Wednesday, as I have a chat with Mike Schussler, economist, on this issue, and find out how you can get into the fight to protect your pensions. Guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on Friday.